And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension and everything and the drama.
How dare! Look at this! How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, it is not a calm time right now. We are about a week away from the start of the Young Stars Classic in Penticton. We are getting ourselves ready for training camp and the hockey season. Regular season is almost a month away. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com, and subscribe wherever you get your audio. Sean, Tyler, and Chris will be getting together this Sunday to preview the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, for those that are new, we talk Vancouver Canucks, we talk Calgary Flames, and then we talk NHL. And so I wanted to do a little bit of a solo podcast focusing a bit on the Canucks and some of the things that are going on around the NHL. So we'll touch on some of those things because I will not be available on Sunday. And just wanted to get started here, just sort of still in sad mode. Really, I think the entire hockey world is still in sad mode, reflecting on the passing of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. Of course, the candlelight vigils were on Wednesday in both Columbus as well as in Calgary, with some very moving speeches from Michael Backlund and Erica Branson. And it still doesn't feel real that they are gone. Of course, remember last Thursday, the rumors started to kind of swelter through social media that this was happening, and then we learned Friday morning of the passing. And then Dan and Matt from Fireside Chat joined me, and we did a reflection podcast on Johnny Gaudreau, which you can check out. But it still doesn't feel very real, right? It still doesn't feel I'm still in a little bit of shock mode. I'm still in a bit of anger mode. It still feels like a grieving, and it still feels like the hockey world is still in that grieving stage. So still thoughts, of course, with Johnny and Matthew, and really good tribute to Cole Caulfield, who's going to change his number to number 13 this year. He's going to wear 13 in honor of Johnny Gaudreau. I wonder if that's the number that Sean Monahan will wear in Columbus in honor of Johnny Gaudreau. I think there'll be a lot of other questions and discussions, which we did discuss in the podcast, of what both organizations will do in honoring Gaudreau, what the league will do in honoring Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. A lot of suggestions about names around the new arena as well. So there's a lot of things still up in the air. I think a lot of this has to do with where the family is at. The Gaudreau family is all at there. So still going to be a lot of emotional moments here. You've got, of course, the Young Star Classic, which Johnny was a big factor in. You've got the first game of the preseason for the Flames, which is coming up. And then you got the regular season as well, which is the Flames and the Canucks, which was where Johnny Gaudreau scored his first ever NHL goal late in the 2014 season there. Before he, or 2013 season, 2013-14 season, that late season game that he had there, but that was where he scored his first goal. But still a lot of emotions, not only from the Flames fans, not only from the Blue Jackets fans, but you saw that all across the hockey world. Saw that with Oiler fans, saw that with Canuck fans. I think everybody was taken aback and just shocked by that whole situation. And just, again, I want to remind or emphasize everybody about this. And I hope this becomes a really focused topic in some ways across not only the hockey world, but the sports world, which you did see a lot of sports tributes, of course, to Johnny Gaudreau, including Jalen Hurts, LeBron James, number of players around the major sporting community. Mike Trout as well kind of gave their tributes. Don't drink and drive. I don't even know what else to say. I think this needs to be more emphasized as we continue on. Don't drink and drive. There is all kinds of other options if you're having too much to drink. And make sure if your friends are having too much to drink, tell them they cannot drive. Do it. Shout out to those who do that. That is such a very important thing. That is a part of friendship. Just quite simply, don't drink and drive. We take the tough turn and there we go. I just wanted a moment of pause before we take the turn, and we will take the turn and focus here a little bit on the Vancouver Canucks. And of course, the two big stories going into camp will be around, first of all, the goaltending, which, of course, there was a lot of speculation around Thatcher Demko and Arthur Silovs, but Ian McIntyre did talk to Jim Rutherford this week. It looks like both of them are planning to be at training camp. There are lots of questions about that. Of course, Silovs didn't make the Latvia Olympic or the Olympic qualifier team, and there was a lot of concern about his injury. Of course, we know about Thatcher Demko. He missed most of the end of the regular season. He played the game one against Nashville in the playoffs, and then after that, he did not play, which there was a lot of speculation about how that would go. But Demko never ended up playing another game in the playoffs. Of course, for Canucks fans, I do believe this. I think if Thatcher Demko is in that series against the Oilers, my belief is that the results of that series is very different. But that didn't happen. But Demko, the plan is to have him ready for the training camp. If he's not quite ready for training camp, it will probably be the regular season. And of course, the question and the debate that Sean, Tyler, and Chris will have will be around if there should be concern. I have a bit of concern, not a lot of concern, but a bit of concern. I mean, he has had his injury troubles. So I think that for Demko, I think it's a question that has to be addressed. I guess the bigger question will be is how much is Demko going to be played during the regular season? And are you going to play him a lot during the start of the season or at the end of the season? Of course, a lot of this has to do with where the Canucks are going to finish. And I'll touch on this in a little bit here, but you're expecting the Canucks to be a playoff team in a top three position with two other teams. So I don't think that they're going to be, they had this huge lead against the Oilers and everyone else in the Pacific Division. And the Oilers did make a run for the Pacific Division in the regular season and ultimately didn't get it. I don't necessarily see that the Canucks or any team in this division is going to run away with it. So I think that's going to play some part of it. But how you start and play Demko through the year is going to be one of the big questions. Of course, lots of new acquisitions. Of course, you've got Jake DeBrusk. You've got Danton Heinen, Kiefer Sherwood, Vincent Desharnais, Derek Forbert back in the lineup. And then, of course, that late acquisition of Daniel Sprong for free agency. You did lose Vasily Podkolzin in a trade to the Edmonton Oilers, which we'll talk about in a bit here. I think it wasn't surprised about the loss of Podkolzin. I thought that the writing was on the wall for him in the playoffs and as the offseason went on. You started to bring in guys that could kind of fill that Podkolzin role. Heinen, Sherwood, Daniel Sprong. It just kind of felt a little bit that the end of Podkolzin's time was there, and it didn't feel like Tocchet trusted him a lot at the end of the playoffs there. Didn't play him a lot. And you got other guys that are kind of making a step to make a run for this lineup as well. You got Phil DiGiuseppe. Let's not forget him. Archie Baines showed well, and he might be competitive. There's just a few other names that are going to be through that training camp lineup. I just felt like Podkolzin was the odd man out. Did they get enough or as much as people thought? I think at times fans do this all the time, that we start to value our players a lot more than what they really are in the National Hockey League. I think a fourth-round pick ultimately was a fair value for Podkolzin, considering where he was. I know that people had higher expectations for him. The fact of the matter is Podkolzin was not waiver exempt this year. He would have had to clear waivers to get back down into Abbotsford. Someone would have claimed him. You got something for him, and he's got a new opportunity in Edmonton. The other, of course, the acquisitions, where are you playing Jake DeBrusk? Where are you playing Danton Heinen? Those are going to be two big questions. The other question is going to be around Elias Pettersson. Of course, we know about his struggles near the end of the year. We know about the struggles that he had during the playoffs, and we know about the new $11 million a year contract. Still, there's going to be a lot of questions around Pettersson. And that's the second biggest story going into training camp. The first one, obviously, is the Demko Silovs goaltending situation. The second one is going to be what's happening with Pettersson. The first one, who is he playing with? The second one, what is he doing? How is he performing? So one could argue a higher level beginning of the season Pettersson could have helped the Canucks beat the Oilers as well, but that didn't happen. They certainly are going to need a lot more from Pettersson. And what my question or what my interest will be is, what shape will Elias Pettersson be in training camp? Is he going to actually put on some muscle and weight? We saw a lot of situations last year where he was pushed off the puck a little bit too easy in the second half of the year, or he fell. I thought the other thing that was really interesting is, of course, Pettersson talked about his injury, but Canucks management did not use it as an excuse. So I think that there's going to be a little bit more pressure internally and externally, and hopefully on Pettersson in his putting on his own pressure as well, so to have a better year. So those are kind of the two big questions that I have for training camp going into the season. Of course, as far as the Young Stars Classic, we'll probably have an opportunity to see Jonathan Lecker-Mackey. Might have an opportunity to see Tom Olander. Of course, they don't think that they're going to factor into the Canucks lineup during the regular season. We may see them for some preseason games, so it's always nice to see the Young Stars and where everybody is at. We'll dig into the Young Stars a little bit later on next week, because I think it's actually a very interesting tournament in a lot of different ways. So we'll dig into that. That's going to be very interesting from both the Flames and a Canucks perspective. So that's kind of my quick Canuck thoughts that I wanted to get out here. I think that there's bigger and longer conversations that Sean, Chris, and Tyler have. I wanted to dig into the Oilers here. Of course, significant offseason things happened. Of course, the biggest news that they had, of course, in this week was the signing of Leon Draisaitl to a $14 million a year contract. He's now the highest paid player in the NHL. For now, we know that will be Connor McDavid when that Connor McDavid contract happens. And we know that signing is going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think with Draisaitl, it really turned out for the most part that this was going to be a matter of when, not if. Especially you're one game away from the Stanley Cup final. You came back from a 3-0 deficit to tie that series. You want to see what you can do again. And I think a lot of people are going to have some high expectations around the Edmonton Oilers. I think that there's a lot of people that are going to have them in the Stanley Cup favorite conversation. I think the trendy Stanley Cup pick will be Edmonton, New Jersey this year. I won't give my Stanley Cup pick, but here are, of course, the second part of their offseason since we last left. Of course, we talked about the free agent signings that they got. Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner, those two signings. They were able to bring back Adam Henrique as well. But they lost Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway to offer sheets to the St. Louis Blues, and they decided not to match him. Of course, Broberg with a $4 million a year contract, Holloway with a $2 million a year contract. And I guess wanted to step into this a little bit because I'm sure that Sean, Tyler, and Chris will get into this as well. One thing I will say, I don't believe, and I'm going to probably be one of the very few people that sit on this side of the island here. And Sean talks about picking a table. This is a table that I'm picking on right now. I don't believe that the Edmonton Oilers are the Stanley Cup contenders that everybody says that they are. I think that, and I think look back to, I think that the Broberg-Holloway situation and how it was handled from the start was, I think, just you cannot come out of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final and not at least have a discussion with Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway about a contract. Not only that, you spent $3 million, which would have signed Broberg and Holloway, by the way, on Jeff Skinner. And I think a lot of people are overrating that contract. I don't think that was a good signing by the Oilers at all. He may give you a lot of offense, but there's not a lot of other things that Jeff Skinner has been known to do. Ask the Buffalo Sabres about that. That was a very overpaid, overinflated contract, and he's being very overinflated in Edmonton. And of course, now the other thing that happened in Edmonton is, of course, they had to trade Cody Ceci, which I think a lot of Oiler fans wanted to have happen. Of course, a lot of that old Stanley Cup Final run was the revelation of the Evan Bouchard and the level that he got to, and he did play very well. But of course, Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse faced a lot of criticism, and some of it was directed towards Nurse, some of it was directed towards Ceci. They traded Cody Ceci to San Jose. They got in another defenseman in that lineup now, but has played less than Philip Broberg. I think that's the other thing that people are not talking about this with the acquisition of Ty Emberson. A lot of Oiler fans are really expecting this Ty Emberson to make a huge jump. The loss of Philip Broberg here, who was arguably your third best defenseman, and arguably from a blue line perspective, saved your Stanley Cup run. Again, I don't understand why you don't sign this. Do you sign him for $4 million? Do you match him? No, look, I don't think that I understand why you're not matching him, but you shouldn't have been in this situation with both Broberg and Holloway in the first place. That's the error. The error isn't not matching them. The error is you left them out in the lurch. And especially with a guy like Philip Broberg, who asked for a trade early on last season, and he takes this step. Why are you not signing this guy? And you're bringing in a guy in Ty Emberson who has played 50 games, and you're asking him to play in a top 4 role. Are you going to keep rolling out Bouchard and Ekholm at 30 minutes a game before you get into the playoffs? And before Oiler fans tell me, well, they're going to add something in the cup funnel, you got in a GM, which we also haven't addressed. The adding a Stan Bowman as a GM, I do not think was a good idea not only on an outside the hockey perspective, but inside the hockey perspective. You look at what he did with the Chicago Blackhawks and the trades that he made for Artemi Panarin, Dustin Byfuglien, Brandon Saad. He took a team that could have probably won 2 more Stanley Cups and decimated that rather quickly. I kind of wonder if this is the same thing. I get, from my perspective here, I think the Canucks had a better offseason than the Edmonton Oilers. I think Sean, Tyler, and Chris will have a good conversation about that. But ultimately, the other thing that, from a Canucks perspective, that I am more confident about is I trust Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford in this regime to acquire the right player at the trade deadline than I do for Stan Bowman. I think that that's a no-brainer to me. I don't trust Stan Bowman in a situation of getting a player that you need to get into the Stanley Cup. And I'm not going to criticize him for the Broberg-Holloway situation. That was ultimately Jeff Jackson that deserves the criticism for that, not Ken Holland. Jeff Jackson deserves the criticism of that. Oiler fans don't want to have a criticism conversation about a guy like Jeff Jackson. Legitimately think that that's a criticism. And ultimately, what did the Oilers have to trade when it comes to the trade deadline to get themselves either A, cap compliant, or B, get them the acquisition that they need? And by the way, the guys that they brought in, Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson, I like Victor Arvidsson. I think that was a really good signing. What happens if they get hurt? Do you think that Matthew Savoy is in a Dylan Holloway level to come in and replace? Because I don't. And I will tell you, I don't think that Vasily Podkolzin is in a Dylan Holloway argument. I would argue that one of the reasons that the Oilers beat the Canucks in the playoffs was Dylan Holloway was more impactful during that series than Nils Höglander. I don't sleep on that loss of Dylan Holloway in Edmonton. I think a lot of these are, and I think there's some Oiler reporters and Oiler fans that are saying that it was not a big deal. I think it is a big deal that Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway are not there. I do not think that these are guys that are very easy to replace. And I think in a cap crunch that the Oilers are in, especially when you're going to spend about $40 million on 3 players with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard, which is reportedly getting $10 million. And then you also have a 34-year-old defenseman in Matthias Ekholm. They turned into the oldest team in the National Hockey League. I'm just not buying into the Edmonton Oilers that everybody else is. I think that they're going to be the trendy Stanley Cup pick. I think that they're in for I think that this team, I don't think this team is as good as people think that they are. And I think that there's one other team that I think both Canuck fans and Oiler fans who continue to argue over the summer on Twitter, they're both sleeping on. And it's the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think there are a couple things to remember. Yes, they did lose Chandler Stevenson. Yes, they lost Jonathan Marchessault. But they are going to have a full season with Thomas Hertl, a healthy Thomas Hertl. Jack Eichel, Thomas Hertl is a very good 1-2 combo at center ice. I would argue that that is at least, if it's not your top 5, it's in your top 10 of your centermen here. Don't sleep on Jack Eichel. Don't sleep on Jack Eichel being in the Selke conversation. He is that type of center, and he performed very well a couple of seasons ago in that series against Edmonton. Not a lot of people wanted to have that conversation, but I will point out how good Jack Eichel is. You brought in Noah Hanifin, who's a lot better than I think people realize. Great skater, and they have the depth to replace a Jonathan Marchessault. A guy like Pavel Dorofeev can pick that up. And again, Kelly McCrimmon is another one of those guys that knows what to do at the trade deadline and gets the right guys. We've seen this happen all the time. That's what Vegas does. And Vegas, the one thing that Vegas has an advantage, and I know that Elliot Friedman has talked a little bit about on the new 32 Thoughts, which, by the way, congratulations to Kyle Bacasas. I know that a lot of people are taking Edmonton off the no trade list. I know that things are looking really good in Edmonton. I still think Vegas is still a desirable place to play. And I would argue that Vegas is still more of a desirable place to play, even though McDavid and Draisaitl are in Edmonton, than Edmonton. It's just Vegas, Edmonton. Where would you rather live? I'm not trying to be insulting to Edmonton, but that's just the difficulty and the challenge. So do not count out the Vegas Golden Knights. And I say that to the Oiler fans, and I also say that to the Canuck fans, because I really feel a lot of Canuck fans are sleeping on Vegas. I think that they can still cause some damage in this Pacific Division. I still think that they can cause some damage in the Western Conference. And then, of course, on the Central Division side, you got the Nashville Predators, who brought in Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, as well as Brady Shea. You signed UC Saros to an 8-year contract as well. And then you got Colorado and Dallas, who are still going to be there. Nathan McKinnon, who is, in my opinion, the second best center in the National Hockey League. Cale Makar, who is one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. You still got that. You've got Mikko Rantanen, who is an elite winger. Gabriel Landeskog is expected to play at some point this year. And you still got and you got Arturi Lehkonen. That's a really good forward group. If they get the goaltending settled there in Colorado, they're going to be good. And Dallas, just remember that Rupe Hintz was not healthy during that series against the Oilers. And Pete DeBoer has found a way to get teams into the conference final and the Stanley Cup. He's still a solid coach. You got probably, in my opinion, the third best defenseman in the National Hockey League in Miro Heiskanen. I think the Chris Tanev loss is a significant loss. No question about that. That would concern me. Jake Ottinger can be a solid goaltender. At times, I think he's been inconsistent since the Dallas series against Calgary. But yeah, still, I think one of the better goaltenders. And so there is, I don't think there's anything to crown with the Edmonton Oilers. I think that there's at least 6, and maybe we're sleeping on the Kraken. I don't know, but at least there's 6 teams that I think have a legitimate opportunity to participate in the June Stanley Cup final. And I would say that the Oilers, Canucks, and Golden Knights are probably going to be the favorites in the Pacific Division. And then you got the Stars, the Avalanche, and I think the Nashville Predators will be a lot of people's pick as well. So I think that this Western Conference is a lot more interesting. I'm not going to sit here and buy that the Oilers are going to get 129 points and blow everybody away. They're not a top 3 cap era team. That's complete nonsense. For those that are messaging that, and I don't think that this forward group is the best forward group in the salary cap era. I think that all that conversations needs to stop. That's just simply and astronomically not true. So that's my little rant on that part of the situation there. Wanted to touch on the Calgary Flames here, and as they get into the Young Stars Classic. Of course, it's really hard not to think about what's going on with the organization. Within a year, they lose Chris Snow. And then, of course, even though was not a Flame, he's going to be forever a Flame in Johnny Gaudreau. We touched on that earlier. But one interesting note in a couple of interesting things that are coming into training camp that are going to be subplot stories. The first one is Jacob Pelletier, who has not signed his contract yet. RFA. I was a guy that believed that Jacob Pelletier would be a guy that would be the one that replaced Backlund and Coleman, or Mangiapane with Backlund and Coleman. Of course, Andrew Mangiapane going on to Washington. But that contract isn't signed yet. And I think that for Jacob Pelletier and the organization, I think they need to get that done before training camp. I don't think that should linger. The other one is interesting is Dan Vladar seems to be in recovery mode. It looks like he will be ready for training camp. So I do think we're going to have a 3 goaltender battle, and I think they're going to ensure that there's going to be a 3 goaltender battle. I don't think that they're just going to give this to Dustin Wolf. I think that they're going to make a competition out of it. And Dan Vladar has earned an opportunity too. He did some yeoman work for the last couple of seasons, backing up Markstrom. He deserves an opportunity to see if he can carry that ball as well. So that's the other interesting thing. And of course, the third thing going on in Calgary that will be interesting as well is around Martin Pospisil. Is he playing center? Is he playing wing? That, of course, he played center for Slovakia. And I think that there's been a lot of talk about moving Pospisil to center at some point. Either it happens in training camp and it happens during the regular season. Have to see what happens there. You can make an argument that Pospisil would be a good fit with Backlund and Coleman. I think Pospisil found some chemistry with Nazem Kadri as well. So that will be interesting. And of course, the question going to be through this year is the veterans on the Flames and how this season starts and what will be happening. I think we'll hear names like Blake Coleman. We'll hear names like Nazem Kadri. Some people have said names like Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson. There's a lot of names that are going to be in front of the trade talk. I think according to 32 Thoughts, I think they're going to wait and see how the start of the season is, and they will go forward with that. We'll dig into that a little bit more as we continue on into the season, because I think that those are the 4 storylines with the Flames. So we covered the Canucks storylines. We covered kind of what's going on around the Pacific Division. We covered Johnny Gaudreau. We covered the Flames. So I think that, of course, I think that will wrap this up from my perspective here. Again, watch on Sunday. Sean, Tyler, and Chris will be getting together around 10, 11, not at o'clock. It's usually a little bit after that. So watch for that. You can, of course, follow Sean on Twitter at BeardyCanuck03, Tyler, OTNOBLE. By the way, thank you, Sean, for hosting. Chris Schneid's, SCHNAIDZ. Well, we get Devin on, of course, Gordhow09, IMKEBOLE, Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe wherever you get your audio. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.